of this committee, so welcome to everyone. It's a while since we last met because of holidays. So, if I can move on to item number 1, the minutes of the meeting held on the 24th of July. Do I have your approval to sign them as a true record, those who were here? Thank you very much, and I'll do that at the end of the meeting. Item number 2, apologies for absence. I've got notes of apologies from Councillor Barnfather for other reasons and is being substituted. We're greatly honoured again this morning that the chairman of the County Council is joining us, Councillor Butler. A great privilege for all of us to see you here.
And it's a privilege to be
of course,
with you as well.
That statement's read. Councillor Errol Henry for other reasons, and the substitute is Councillor Creamer, who is late and may not arrive by the time we've finished, but there we are, that's the way it is. And Councillor Samantha Deakin for other reasons, but there is no substitute provided. And Councillor Michael Payne for other reasons, and I don't know what those could be, but no doubt we shall read all about it eventually. And the substitute yet again is Councillor Pringle, who's becoming a permanent member of this committee. So, and indeed it's a pleasure that you're here. So if you're all happy to accept those apologies, I don't think there are any others, but the rest of us are all here. Item number 3, declarations of interest. I am advised again by the monitoring officer that I should declare an interest in item 8, which is the Broxtowe Community Governance Review Stage 2, putting that in language that everybody will understand. They want to reorganise the parish boundaries in Broxtowe. I am chairman of Nuttall Parish Council for my sins, and I must have sinned greatly, I have to say. And so I have got to declare an interest, and so the vice chairman will take over when that item comes up. The next item, then, the first really substantive item on the agenda, is our usual one, which is the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman's decisions June to July of this year. And there are some where the Ombudsman has found no fault. They are recorded for the sake of transparency, and do feel free to ask questions if you feel the need to on those. But there are 2 items, 2 cases where the Ombudsman has found fault, and we have got details of those. So I'm going to take them in order. The first case is in Children's, where Mrs. B complained that the council had failed to provide horse riding lessons for her daughter soon enough. So do you want to go into that one for us in a little bit more detail?
Yes, of course, Chair. That's slightly more than horse riding. It was about a failure to provide educational provision for a period. In many ways, this case speaks to issues that we encounter quite commonly. This was a young girl who was struggling to engage in her mainstream school. She had a new EHCP, Education, Health and Care Plan, which Mum decided to appeal. We were working initially to re-engage her with school through our health-related education team. That didn't work, sadly. Then we designated her EOTAS, which is educated other than at school, but the Ombudsman found some delays in putting provision in place, including horse riding, which they determined not to be in scope of the appeal. It becomes very confusing when a young person or their parent is appealing local authority decisions because the Ombudsman cannot touch that aspect of the provision. The further complexity was that this young girl had a period of ill health which required hospitalisation. And there were some significant questions about how much education and what kind of education she could actually access due to her health. However, the judgment, when I read it carefully, does actually uphold the local authority's actions on many fronts. It finds fault in others, but I think the better news is the young girl is now in a mainstream college. She starts this week. Relationships with the family are in a far better position, and she's doing a level 3 program, and genuinely hope that all goes well for her. There is learning from this case, of course, as there is from all, and it's particularly for me about clarifying what is and is not in scope of an appeal, because that's where the local government ombudsman found, I think, the fault in terms of the horse riding. But it is a more positive story moving forward, and I'll happily take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from members on this particular case? Very complex, as you can see, and it's taken some unravelling. Nothing further on this one? Councillor Butler.
Not a question really, but more of an observation as much as anything. Obviously, the amount of money involved in the compensation is significant, and I'm sure everybody has their views about that. But also cases like this, however they arise, I wonder as well, just sort of the hidden costs, because the amount of time it takes to investigate and follow up and in officer time and all the rest of it. I'm not sure whether we ever work those sort of figures out, but it seems to be the world we're in, isn't it? That people, for perhaps understandable reasons, find need to go to the ombudsman, but do people necessarily think of the other fallout with regards to cost and time, and also the time that's been taken to investigate these is taking time away from staff to be able to do day-to-day things as well. So it's just an observation, really. But I hear it's acknowledged that lessons learned and all the rest of it, and when we move on.
I'll come to you in a moment, Councillor Smith. Is there any comment officers might wish to make on that? I don't suppose we do assess the amount of officer time in monetary terms, do we?
Well, thanks for the point, Councillor Butler. It's actually something we're looking at, because it's all to do with the work of the quicker we sort the complaint out, the less time, the less resource, the less potential compensation later on. But I mean, the figures are quite scary when you look at the life of a complaint as to how much officer time as well as the redress. Yeah,
it's appreciated, Councillor Butler, that you understand the amount of time it takes.
Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was going to say I completely understand where you're coming from, Councillor Butler, but I also think that yes, it takes a considerable amount of time and it takes a lot of office time, but it's been nearly 2 years that this child was with no education. It shouldn't have got to the point where they felt the need to complain to the Ombudsman in the first instance. And I don't mean this in any way, I'm not attacking anybody, but if we'd got it right in the first place, we wouldn't be having to investigate the complaint. And this is what the Ombudsman's there for, so we can learn from these mistakes. I mean, the number of cases that we get coming through here, I believe, has increased. Now, I don't think that's a scale of we're constantly doing something wrong, but more people are aware that the Ombudsman's out there. But I do also, like I say, I completely understand the point, and I get it's expensive. I completely agree with you on that. But if we're doing it right in the first instance, they shouldn't be having to go to the Ombudsman.
Any comment on that? I would dispute the fact that we're getting more cases, and I think quite the reverse, and we shall see in the report, I think it's the next report, or certainly a report later on, we're doing extremely well as an authority in terms of the number of ombudsman's complaints. I think you've heard this morning that it was a highly complex case, and there was an issue as to what was included in the appeal and therefore excluded from anything that the ombudsman could consider.
I think, if I may also add, there are some cases where what right is not immediately apparent, and we have to do some work with our families and professionals to actually define what the right provision is for a young person.
And it's always difficult if that provision is not immediately available. I know we often have a statutory duty to provide certain things, but if the provision is not there, is not available, then you simply cannot meet that statutory requirement, no matter how hard you try. And we've seen that in one or two cases. Councillor Turner.
Yeah, just briefly, we've got two cases here in front of us. How many cases does the council have in front of them? You know, and how many? Because I suspect it's a very, 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 very small percentage of the total services and everything plans that we put forward for the general public. One's too many, obviously, but it'd be an interesting figure because as a percentage, I bet it's a very small amount.
Well, good question actually, and it actually will be covered in the next part of the meeting about how many cases we get compared to our total number of complaints.
If there's nothing further on that particular case, if we can move to the second case, again, is in children's, but it's been the Ombudsman's found fault in the way in which we've dealt with this complaint. The Ombudsman felt it should have been escalated through a different route. Would you like to unpack that a little bit for members?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Yes, this case. In the report, the gentleman that's complaining wasn't actually at the visit that the social worker made regarding the referral that they had anonymously. So the council did its duty of following the referral, following process, and during the investigation they found that actually we did follow process correctly. We appreciate the fact that it's uncomfortable for the family that's being investigated. And Mr. who wasn't there but took exception to the visit. He seemed to think that we didn't carry out the visit without consent, but obviously we would never have entered the property without consent, and took exception to it because he's concerned about his reputation, etc., from the council investigating that the issues that they've been told about. As a complaints team, we have learned, because although he was given the answers to what, he didn't like what he was told, but we did follow procedure, and sometimes complainants don't like the answers. It is what it is, it's fact. And we empathised obviously with the situation. He then said he wasn't happy with that. The team felt there was nothing more they could do from an investigation because he's had the answers to what he was looking for, he just didn't like the answer. However, the learning from the team is that any cases like this, and they are rare, where they aren't happy, they want to escalate it, the relevant officer would speak to either the senior practitioner or myself to discuss the case of moving forward. We cannot, in theory, we cannot refuse a request to escalate. It is in the legislation. But obviously we have also got to consider things like public person and whatever else. We did wrong here. We'll learn from it. We have learned from it, and we move forward. And the investigation's happening. I'm quite intrigued to see what they find.
Thank you. Councillor Saddington.
I'm just interested to know if I've understood this web of material. Did the gentleman know you were making the visit? It said he wasn't available. Did he know?
As far as I'm aware, no. But they did try and contact the family, and they turned up, and his partner let the social worker in.
So was it not considered a risk that you were going to visit without his knowledge?
I mean, we'd probably speak to the safeguarding team, but at the end of the day, if there's a referral for safeguarding, they've got to act pretty quickly because the duty is to the children.
In fact, it was a wasted visit because he wasn't there and he wasn't happy. And clearly his partner didn't have probably the legal right to make decisions, so it was a wasted trip.
Well, I think they both have parental responsibility. So.
Oh right, okay.
No, I don't think it would be a wasted trip in that sense. I think the emphasis here is when you've got as you will know only too well from your previous role, when you've got a safeguarding referral, you've got to act very quickly, because if something happens and you haven't,
Yes, then there's
so
trouble.
it's better to, I suppose, err on this side of a mistake than to have something happen to a child. And that's I think what we've always got to bear in mind.
So that was the nub of the issue why
yeah.
I made the visit.
So yes. Anything further on this particular case, Councillor Pringle?
Just in front of us, I think we've got two completely different ombudsman's decisions and cases. Well, the first one was really complex, and I understand that the financial cost, but also the need to be detailed in that. Well, this one, to me, when I read it, and assuming I've heard correct that we followed process, irrespective of whether who knew or who didn't know, but we followed process. And I'm not sure what more we could have done on the visit, it being a safeguarding visit and needing to happen. I'm reading this as saying, the sceptical in me would say there's something more that I'm not seeing within this report from the challenge, not necessarily the way in which we handled it. That, I think, is concerning to us.
Well, the report is the Ombudsman report's on the next lot of pages. There is nothing further that we should have escalated the complaint. That's the bottom line, regardless of the fact that we felt there was nothing else that could have been told to the complainant. It wasn't the partner that was making the complaint; it was him who wasn't even there, which makes it trickier because it's kind of he said, we said kind of scenario. So, like I said, I'm going to be intrigued as to what the investigation picks up, because the investigation's around whether the council's followed procedure and protocol, which we believe we did.
I think it might be useful for reassurance of the whole committee, not just Councillor Pringle, when this subsequent investigation has been carried out, that we actually get a separate report back. It can go in this section of the committee papers. Would that give you reassurance that everything is above board? Because I think it's important that it is seen to be. Okay. Well, the recommendation is that you note the report, and I'm happy to move that. All those in favour? Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is item 5, which is the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman's Annual Review Letter 23/24. And you have the letter in front of you, and on page 31 of the papers, I think we can see statistics there that should make us feel very pleased. Whilst we've always said that one complaint where fault has been found against us is one too many, nevertheless, I think the important figure there is at the top of the page, where you can see 22 upheld decisions. This represents 2.6 upheld decisions per 100,000. The average for authorities of this type is 4.5 upheld decisions per 100,000 residents. So I think that is pretty pleasing. So anything further to add to this report?
Thanks, Chair. No, but just to take Councillor Turner's question earlier of how many ombudsman decisions we get versus how many complaints, or the other way around, you can see there that less than 9% of our cases end up at the Ombudsman generally, and in the grand scheme of things, of the total number of complaints that we have, less than 2% of complaints end up with an upheld Ombudsman decision. And yeah, just to highlight what Councillor Owens just said, it's quite pleasing that we compare relatively well to councils of similar size, and all the other stats that you see in front of you.
Any further comments or questions on this report? Yes, Councillor Pringle.
Just a comment, just to say, on the face of this, it is positive, the responses that we're receiving. So the comparison, I don't know, because I'm an apprentice on your committee now. But to me, if I was reading this, I would think, we're doing a pretty good job here. So.
Thank you. Yeah, well done to everybody. Well, the recommendation is to consider. Well, we've considered, so I don't think there's anything to move on that one. So, and if there's nothing further, we'll move on. The next one is a report of the Service Director, Finance, Infrastructure and Improvement, Financial Regulations Waivers, 23. Is this 2023 to 2034? So you've got a crystal ball, have you? Right.
It's good.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. Yeah, I've also it's good. You've got the report in front of you. I don't know whether there's anything you want to highlight.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so this is the annual report that comes to committee. The key point, I guess, to note is that the waivers have gone up this year in comparison to the previous year, and a considerable amount of those were in children and families. But a lot of the rationale for that was the outcome of the SEND inspection and the provisions we needed to put in place quite quickly to respond to that. But also we had some statutory services that were out to procurement where we didn't get enough responses from bidders, and there's more work we needed to do. So there was extensions of existing contracts. There were statutory services. So again, we've had a few instances, and particularly in terms of the increased value. So that sort of outlines those key numbers there. I guess the key point to make members aware is that we do try and keep waivers as much to a minimum, and the spend on the approved waivers, it is only 1.6% of the total spend we have externally with external providers. So it's a significant amount of the council spend is compliant and within financial regulations. But happy to take any questions or comments anyone might have.
Yeah, I think you've answered in part some of the concerns that I've picked up. The two big ones making up much of the 11 million in children's are two contracts, external contracts, where they've not got the bidders in time. Now, are there lessons to be learned from that in going out to tender much earlier in the process? Because I suspect it's a fairly limited number of tenderers that are available for some of this work. Therefore, we do need to surely to go out earlier. Have any lessons been learned as far as that is concerned?
There have, Chair. I think that there is something about ensuring we time the commissioning activity early on, but also the market engagement. We have done some market engagement with bidders, but I think some further market engagement needed to be done to ensure we worked with the bidders to onboard them on the new contracting arrangements, because the original contract was quite a long period. It was bringing them on to say, well, there's a new commissioning activity, working with commissioners to get the specs in time. So definitely there's been quite a bit of learning on that with the commissioning team.
Thank you. And I'll just make one other point. Can you remind committee there's just under £900,000 of requests that have been rejected? What happens to those bids that are rejected?
So we do work with the departments to remind them of the financial regulations process. A couple of the situations we've got in the appendix, we had the service area who had assumed that the previous the contracts we have within the department were applicable for instance, we've got catering and FM one and a place one. So we've gone back to them saying, no, they're separate contracts. That doesn't acceptable. You need to now conduct a procurement activity. So we have gone back to them. We've rejected the waivers. They've gone through a compliant process. And we do keep reminding them, as does the Section 151 officer.
If I may, Chair, because you asked a very good question, that you will see in most of the cases is because I don't give forgiveness for people that shouldn't stick with financial regulations, and in some cases we've asked the department to terminate the contract because it's not compliant with our financial regulations, and gone through a compliant tender process to ensure that they are compliant.
Has that meant any interruption in service?
We do try our best to make sure that they are consistent, but in most of those cases, it's for an additional service which is not a statutory service. So actually pausing and making the department commissioners rethink what they should be doing and make sure they're compliant with financial regulations is still the right course of action.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions on that report? In which case, I move the recommendation on page 35. Second. All those in favour? Anyone against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. The next item on the agenda, item number 7, is the whistleblowing update. And again, you have the report in front of you. Is there anything that needs to be highlighted on this, Mr. Mason?
Thank you, Chair. This is the annual report which committee receives on whistleblowing in the previous calendar year. As members can see, in 2023 we had 8 reports made under the whistleblowing policy. That's an increase from the previous years when we've had 2 in each of the years on 2020, 2021 and 2022. The reason for the increase doesn't appear to be systemic, so each of the complaints is individual, but 4 did relate to the Children and Families Department, so we've included a paragraph from the relevant department to try to draw out whether there are any issues that might be of concern for the committee. We've expanded the report this year to include the Appendix A, which has details of the individual complaints to give some reassurance around what the nature of complaints received are and what the outcome to the complaints is. We are also working on the whistleblowing policy update, so the actual review of the policy itself, which is due to be considered by committee at its next meeting. The draft is in circulation at the moment, and we're just trying to get the wording correct so that when it comes into effect, pending committee's approval, it does the job it needs to do. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any comments or questions on the whistleblowing update? Yes, Councillor Meakin.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to ask the same question. He just answered my question. I was going to say, when was the update going to be come through for the policy? But obviously, he's already addressed that. Thank you.
Ahead of you, yes. Good. It's always nice. Councillor Pringle.
Thanks, Chair. The external, the 2 external issues that are they follow the same procedure that we do? Have we got control over that?
I don't know. Do you want to comment on that?
The 2 external matters relate to, one relates to a company in which the council has a stake, so it was considered, I think it was referred back to the original company for them to investigate the whistleblowing complaint, and the other related to an academy school, which isn't under our purview, but which does have some relevance in the sense for our broader safeguarding remit. So both of those were separate complaints, but dealt with in accordance with someone else's policy.
So, in effect, anybody outside of our control has the openness and guarantee that they can make a complaint under the same issues that the same policy that we hold on whistleblowing.
Whether it would be appropriate for the council to investigate the policy to investigate an individual complaint under our policy would depend on whether we have responsibility for the thing that's being whistleblown about. So it would be difficult to give a prescriptive answer in terms of exactly what would come within the council's purview under its own policy and what wouldn't. But generally speaking, if there was a more appropriate body or a more appropriate policy for something to be investigated under, it would be under that separate policy rather than the whistleblowing policy that would be investigated.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Councillor Turner.
Just briefly, the increase in the numbers is I think, is a positive. People are not afraid to come forward and show their feelings and express their concerns.
Yeah, it's a positive in some ways. I suppose it's a negative in others, because I would like to feel that if people have got concerns, they can do it through normal channels that don't require to go through the whistleblowing channels. But anyway, I think as long as we get there at the end of the day, and if there's anything untoward, it's sorted. That's the main thing. Any other comments or questions on this? You're asked to note the report, so are you happy to note it? Right. I'll clear off then for item number 8.
Thank you very much. Right, so for item 8, Broxtowe Community Governance Review, stage 2, I formally move the recommendations included on page 55 of the agenda pack, that the Chief Executive be authorised to submit the response at Appendix A to the report to Broxtowe Borough Council as notified County Council response to the consultation on the final draft proposal of its Community Governance Review. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Saddington? Okay, thank you very much. Invite Joe Toomey to introduce the item.
Thank you. There's nothing particularly to add to the report that's been circulated, just to highlight that the draft response is structured around the impact of the proposals on the County Council's divisions rather than the wider community impacts that the proposals would have on the individual parishes within Broxtowe.
Yeah, thank you very much. Has anyone got any views or like to comment on this? Yeah, Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Chair, this item is one that concerns the independent group. I've spoken in quite depth with Councillor Elizabeth Williamson, who represents Brinsley and Greasley and whatnot, and she's a parish councillor for Greasley as well, which is one of the parish councils set to be abolished as part of the governance review. Greasley Parish Council has existed for over 100 years and is responsible for parks, allotments, sports, community centres, amongst many other things. They are a centre of an extraordinary battle for survival, with the spoils shared out between newly created councils. I appreciate that this item relates to a small amount of changes and that are within the county, but it is part of a much wider proposal. So for that reason, I cannot support this today, because it's not just the impact on the county division as such, it's the wider impact that it's got in the communities of Greasley and Watnall and Brinsley. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thank you very much. Yeah, I suppose the big thing with all these community governance reviews, I think we all have them in our own patches, is that when it comes to parish boundaries, it's very much it's a very important issue actually for a lot of these villages and towns. I suppose in respect of this letter, I don't believe we're making any comments on the parish boundaries, are we? No, so by all means do, but I think we're only commenting on the bits that actually apply for the county council. Councillor Butler.
Thank you. I actually have some sympathy with what Councillor Smith is saying. I understand that, because this is an awful lot of work that's been done by Broxtowe. And am I reading this correctly in paragraph? Well, I am reading it because it's printed here, paragraph 6. That this is going to affect 30 electors, and it seems an extraordinary amount of work that's going on. I mean, they obviously have their reasons for doing it, and it's not for us to comment because it's their remit to do that. But is that? Am I basically right in that this, in the greater scheme of things, this is going to affect 30 people?
Yeah.
Or am I being too simplistic?
The 30 people are the people affected by changes to the proposed county division boundaries. There are wider proposals that are available to view on Broxtowe's website about abolishing and merging parish councils. From our perspective, we've concentrated on the technical side because that would be what they needed post-review should they make those changes, in order to share with the Local Government Boundary Commission for England to get the related alterations made, so that you've not got funny little bits of streets and odd properties in different divisions to their neighbours.
The joys of the local government boundaries reviews. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Councillor Pringle?
Yeah, thanks. And again, I would imagine that the detail of the general aspect of what's being discussed at parish councils is a lot deeper than what we're looking at here. And I just need to be clear that we're only recognising our intention on this. And as Councillor Butler says, 30 electors seems a bizarre amount of effort to go into restrict. Having said that, if I was one of them 30 electors, I'd want this doubly to make sure I was it. So I understand the parish differences. I'm sure there's lots and lots of discussions going on there, but I just want to be clear that when we make a decision on this, that I'm voting on what we're doing and not having any effect on the localised voice.
Yeah, I think that's a really clear distinction that needs to be made. We're not delving into the nitty gritty of the review. I think we'll have our own bites on. I say bites. We'll have our own views on our own patches. And actually, I think it's we're only commenting on what the county council is saying in respect to the divisional boundaries, rather than the parish council, which I believe anyone who wishes to have their voices known on that subject can go through the boundary commission's proposals and comments and such. But okay, any more questions or comments or points to make? Okay, thank you very much. So do you like to comment, Councillor Saddington? No? Just a seconder, but otherwise
I think we'll just leave it and
yeah.
partake in minutiae regarding the parishes.
Okay. So move to the vote on the recommendations. All those in favour? Those against? And any abstentions? No. Okay. Thank you very much. So I think we can let Councillor Owen back in.
Oh.
Don't come again. The last item on the agenda is the work programme, which has been circulated to you. We're asked whether any changes are required to the work programme. Are you happy with the work programme as it is? In which case, yes, Councillor Pringle.
Just, are we going to ask the gentleman to return with the points that were raised?
Yeah. Okay. So with that.
Yeah. So for the sake of clarity for everybody, that's adding whistleblowing policy to the October meeting.
Okay. Move the recommendation.
Yep. Second it.
All in favour? Sorry,
just for clarification on what Councillor Pringle, were you asking about the whistleblowing or the report back from the complaint?
Oh, sorry.
it was a report back from complaints, wasn't it? That yeah, it's a report back from complaints, but it is going. I suggested it form part of the report that we normally get regarding the Ombudsman, because it is sort of an extension to that. So it will be part of that report, which is automatically on the agenda anyway. Okay.
Yeah, I think it was my confusion.
There's a monitoring officer confusing us all, but then possibly.
That's what I thought.
So, with that confusion sorted out, I hope, all those in favour of the work programme? That's unanimous. Thank you very much, and thank you for your attendance, and I declare the meeting closed.